On BBC One as part of our V45 season, marking the 60th anniversary of the end of the Second World War, we joined Des Lynam and some very special guests, reuniting friends and comrades. We'll meet again.
Thank you. Good evening and welcome to We'll Meet Again. Tonight we're commemorating the 60th anniversary of Victory in Europe Day, when the world celebrated the German surrender at the end of the Second World War. Around the country, concerts, memorials, parties and reunions will mark this momentous occasion. As our contribution to the day's celebrations, we've got some remarkable stories. Stories about men and women who showed kindness, friendship and bravery to others during the war. And tonight we'll be trying to reunite friends who haven't seen each other for 60 years. Some of the stories tonight include these two men who last saw each other when they were just 15, and after 60 years they're finally reunited. After decades of searching, these sisters meet the West Indian airmen who became part of their family during the war. Also tonight we reunite this former prisoner of war with friends from the prison camp he thought he'd never see again. Over the next hour we'll hear these and other amazing stories of courage, loyalty and loss, and share in the joy of their reunions. We start tonight with one heartfelt story by a former airman, Ted Beswick. He spent the war as part of a 7-man Lancaster bomber crew. Facing constant danger, with his life at risk on a daily basis, he formed a close bond of friendship with the rest of his crew.
In 1943, as soon as he was old enough, Ted Beswick joined the RAF. He was just 18. He trained to fly on Lancasters. By this stage of the war, they were the most commonly used bombers in the fight against Germany. He immediately became best friends with Heppy Heppenstall, but they needed another 5 people to make up a full Lancaster crew.
We were placed together in the hangar and we were told, get yourselves sorted out. So Heppy come to me and he says, I found a crew. I said, oh, somebody willing to have us? I said, yes.
2 of the crew were Canadians, Walter and Jimmy. The other 3 came from across the British Isles.
It's a part of yourself, your crew member. You worked with each other and you looked after each other. Even on the ground, you looked after each other and you flew as a team. What you were feeling or what you was experiencing, they'd be experiencing the same thing.
Bomber Command had the highest casualty rate of all sections of the RAF during the war. Nearly 1 in 2 airmen never made it home.
There was always danger. Danger, take off. There was danger. You could be attacked by fighters. There could be guns en route. I used to think, I wonder what's going to happen. Are we going to get through this one? You used to think about it and you used to think, well, we might not come back, but it's not going to happen to us. But of course it did happen to a lot.
On April 9, 2 attacks on Hamburg were carried out simultaneously by Bomber Command.
The Germans were now on the defensive, but they still threw all their remaining air power at the Allies. Ted's plane was hit by flak and Heppy was injured in the arm. But luckily, they all made it home safely.
After the war, the crew was disbanded. They all went their separate ways and Ted never got the chance to say a proper goodbye.
I often wonder what it'd be like to see them again and what have they been doing all these years, and if they ever think about them times. We're not getting any younger. Time is of an essence now. I get a bit worked up. Be very emotional. Just just thinking about it now, it'd be wonderful to see him.
And we're joined now by Ted Beswick, his wife Kathleen and daughter Marilyn. That was a very moving film you put together there. Your comrades were vitally important to you, weren't they?
Yeah.
And it was important to have people that you got on with and that you liked at
right.
the time. What people really don't understand who haven't been through that sort of experience is how you coped with the daily fear, the daily worry. I mean, it must have almost driven you to distraction.
Well, you were a bit concerned about it, but then you think, well, it's not going to happen to us as a crew.
I bet there was a bit of black humour around in those days, wasn't there? You had
There was
some
a
sort
lot
of
of
breakfast ritual,
Oh,
didn't you?
yeah. Funny enough, the flying meal was always eggs and bacon, you know, and you'd always get some wag say to somebody or other, if you don't come back, can I have your egg? But it used to happen to some of them.
What Ted didn't know when he was making that short film was that we were already working closely with Kathleen and Marilyn to try and reunite him with members of his crew who ended up scattered around Britain and in Canada. And we sent Ted here to the RAF Museum in North London to do some more filming for us. He then got some surprise news.
We went through an intensive box barrage, and
Actually, Dad, we've got a surprise for you. Would you like to open that envelope?
Oh no.
You're going to Canada to meet with your crew.
I don't believe it.
We're going now.
You've contacted them?
Yes.
As Ted was getting used to the idea that he was off to Canada, two of his former crew, Englishman Heppy and Jimmy, were making their way to the Canadian Aviation Museum in Ottawa to meet him. As soon as they got together, they immediately began to reminisce.
It sure brings back memories, doesn't it?
It certainly does. It seems so such a long time ago. We used to get along very well. When Ted came into a room and I was there, he'd go like that and I go like that back to him. So it was some tie, I guess.
We called him Beeswax, we called him Heppy, and I'm not going to say what they call me, so...
Ted arrives at the museum, having been told he's not going to meet up with his crew until later that evening.
Oh my God, I don't even know.
No.
While he talks to camera, the other two are slowly creeping up on him.
Approaching the target,
Who taught this happy heart of mine to
heavy
fly?
box barrage.
He wears a pair of silver wings.
What the hell are you doing here?
Jimmy!
Hey, it's good to see you. It's good to see you.
Please, you couldn't make it. Okay.
Yes,
You might be
Yeah.
very emotional. It's still the same smile. Look at him. He's always laughing. He always never old.
Jimmy, Heppy and Ted finally get the chance to relive their memories of being in a Lancaster and catch up on their time apart.
Do you remember that time we went down the pub? We'd only got 3 bikes between us.
We flew together, we drank together, and here we are together again. And that was great. Just great. In fact, I'm going to start crying again.
Yeah. I'm getting tears now. Yeah.
Ted, you've had a bit of time to recover since that meeting.
Yeah.
What do you feel about it now?
Oh, absolutely marvellous to have met up with them. Jimmy never seemed to have changed. Always got that laugh and smile. You know,
People get older, but they don't actually change, do they?
They
really?
don't change. No, they don't change.
And I know your wife and daughter, you took great delight in fixing that up for him, didn't you?
Yeah. We did, yes.
Wonderful, wonderful.
It was difficult at times.
Oh, it was
but,
difficult.
We managed it.
Yeah.
He
Had to keep
didn't
the
know he
secret
was
from
going
him.
to Canada.
No,
I had a job to pack.
Did you?
I did.
Yeah.
He kept saying, I shan't want those thick clothes on in England,
the
in
BBC
London. They thought he was coming to London.
I bet you've had to trick him over the years a few times. You're probably used to it.
No, it's the first time I've ever done any white lies.
Is it really? After all those years?
I felt a bit guilty.
Well, sadly, two of Ted's crew, Paddy and Taffy, have passed away in recent years, and the other two, Ivor Saw from Leeds and Mac McLean from Canada, were too poorly to be at the reunion. But not wanting to be left out, they sent you these special messages.
Oh.
Hello, Ted. It's Ivor here. I'm so sorry I couldn't be with you when you went on the crew reunion to Canada. I often think about you and, of course, all the crew, those good times we had together, flying together. Good Lord, it's 60 years ago now. I can hardly believe it. Remember this, Ted? You made it for me out of balsa wood. Solid piece, I remember it well. Still got it. Great memories of you. I send my best wishes to yourself and your family, and of course to the rest of my crew and the families. Goodbye, Ted. Ivor, over and out.
This is a message for Ted Beeswax. I'm really sorry I missed the reunion. I would have loved to have been there. I often think of those days when we were a crew together. Wishing you all the best.
That was nice, eh? Enjoy
Lovely.
that?
Yeah.
Wonderful.
Good.
First time I've seen him since those days, yeah. Mac.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Before we let you go, there's someone who wants to highlight the bravery and sacrifices of the crews who were part of Bomber Command during the war. He was also only 20 when he flew with the RAF, although he's been promoted a little bit since then. Please welcome Sir Michael Beetham, Marshal of the Royal Air Force, the most senior man in the service.
Well, it's a great pleasure, Ted, to see you again. What I have got is a picture which I'd like to present to you. It depicts a Lancaster crew going out to their aircraft in preparation for a raid on Germany. To bring back memories, and I think it typifies vividly the special bond that exists, as you all know, between each crew. We also recognize that it was a vital task because after Dunkirk it was only by bombing that one could bring Germany down. And the bombing campaign was a highly successful one and a major contribution to victory. The cost, though, was heavy. 55,000, that's over half, were killed, but they did not die in vain.
Gentlemen, thank you very much indeed. Thank you. Now, schools all over the UK are busy doing projects about the war and VE Day. And in the audience tonight is 13-year-old Jamie from North London. He's right here with his step-grandfather, who he calls Uncle Ted. As part of a school project, Jamie here made a film about his Uncle Ted's experiences of living in London during the war when it was under attack.
Hi, I'm Jamie, and this is my Uncle Ted. I'll be talking to him about his wartime experience, and in particular, talking to him about someone very special who he thinks has saved his life.
I was just 15. It was a Saturday evening, and I had a very good friend. His name was Alfred.
Right, so this is Finsbury Park,
We
Astoria.
wanted to go and see a film at Finsbury Park, Astoria.
So that's the cinema.
This was Finsbury Park, Astoria.
We couldn't get in there because it was full up and all seats were taken. We said, okay, we'll go back to my house. On the way back, there was Finsbury Park Empire.
And we saw the name Vera Lynn up on the wall. And we said, let's see if we can get seats and go in and see Vera Lynn.
We were tremendously excited because she was a very, very well-known celebrity, and she was on everybody's lips in that particular period of time.
There'll be bluebirds over
Little did Uncle Ted know that that concert would be a life-changing experience.
I'm quite sure now that had it been anybody else, we would not have gone there. We would have gone back to my house and played cards. We caught the bus to go home. I said goodbye to Alfred on the bus and got off at my stop. When I turned the corner into my road, I was absolutely horrified at the sheer devastation.
The whole street had been flattened by a V2 rocket.
There were streets and streets and streets of terrace houses. They fell like a pack of cards. The rest of my family, 6 in total, including my grandfather, were killed in that raid.
This is the first time Uncle Ted has been back to his former home. This is where you live?
Yep.
All
all gone.
This side of the road, that side of the road, everything just flat.
All along there were terrace houses. You can imagine the scene. It was absolutely horrendous, really traumatic. You think of, I lost all my family here. It's like visiting a cemetery, really. Yeah.
That was a good report, Jamie. Do you enjoy doing that?
Yes, thanks.
You got an agent?
Nope.
No? We'll fix you up with one. Well, you had an amazing escape, Ted, but
Yes.
an awful time at the same time. Dreadful time for you.
It's devastating. To this day, it's in my mind.
What about your friend Alfred Akers? What happened to him? Do you remember?
No, we lost touch, as so many people did in the war. The resettling was a traumatic thing, and I'm afraid we did lose touch with each other.
Yeah. You've regained touch. He's right here, just behind you. Have a look
Really?
round. Yes. There he is, right there.
Impossible.
There he is.
Good Lord, I don't believe it.
Aren't you going to go and say hello to each other?
Yes.
Well, why don't you do it?
Oh, Alfred. You remember? Vera Lynn. Oh my God. You remember? Yeah. What a surprise. Alfred Akers. Oh, I'm so pleased. I'm so pleased.
What can I do in the car?
We were going home to play cards.
Why don't we reform the reunion up on stage? Come on and join me over. Alfred, when did you find out about Ted's tragedy, about his loss?
Well, Ted got off the bus, and the bus had to pass the top of where Ted lived. And as you went past, you could see all the carnage. The place was just devastated. It was flattened, and I never saw Ted, but his place is it was just gone. There was nothing there at all. It was just bricks and mortar and everything just flattened.
How come you didn't keep in touch down the years, Ted?
I don't know. It was so chaotic at the time. We were searching around hospitals for our families. The injured were taken to several hospitals, so we had to do a tour, my uncle and I, of the various hospitals. He couldn't leave me on my own. And to see people covered in soot, they were not allowed to be touched until the doctor had seen them. So for a 15-year-old, that really hit you very hard.
Mm-hmm. What's it like getting together again, you two guys?
Well, this you've done the Cilla Black on me here, haven't you?
I've never been called that before.
No.
Very nice.
It's a wonderful experience to see him tonight. This really is the first time.
It's good to see your smiling faces, I tell you. But
It's
Ted, there was
wonderful.
another person you mentioned in the film, wasn't there? You've always said that it was the singer and Force's sweetheart Vera Lynn that played a part in saving your life. Did you
She
not?
did save my life.
She saved your life. Well, Ted, 60 years on, you can finally say thank you personally. Please welcome Dame Vera Lynn.
She saved Alfred's life as well. Oh, bless you. Oh, bless you. I've tried so many times to get through to you. And I always say I owe my life to you. Thank you. Oh, I really do. And so did Helfrich. Do you remember at the
Yes, I do.
Finchley Park Empire?
I do remember, yes.
Vera, come and sit here with me, and we can continue the conversation so that everybody here and at home can hear it. What were you saying, Ted, to Dame Vera?
I was asking Vera if she remembered.
Yes, Finchley Park.
Finchley Park
Yes,
Empire.
I remember. Well, of course, this always happened, you know, just before, particularly when I got to a nice, quiet part, we'd hear the sirens go off, but we would continue the show until the people, the manager would come on stage.
Made an announcement.
Made an announcement, say those who wished to leave could leave now, and some did, some stayed.
So you think this lady is directly responsible for you being here?
And Alfred.
And Alfred.
Absolutely,
Definitely.
absolutely. If it had been anybody else on that billboard, we wouldn't have gone in.
Alan, we wouldn't have gone in.
No, at the time, Vera Lynn was top of the pops.
Yep.
She was a #1, and she still
And
is
you
in my
got some
heart.
return tickets.
Yes, we did.
And what about the surprise of meeting Vera tonight?
That's wonderful.
Well, to meet two people like this is an integral part of my life. As I said earlier, the situation was so chaotic. You've got to think about this. It's so chaotic. People were scurrying everywhere, nowhere to live, and people just lose touch with each other. That was one of the throwbacks of the war.
A final message from you to Vera tonight?
Thank you for my life.
Oh.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Vera. Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you, Vera. A big thank you to Dame Vera Lynn, who helped the morale of so many during the war and has entertained us so royally since. Thank you, Vera. Now, victory in Europe meant that hundreds of thousands of British troops could now return home and try to restart their lives. But with Japan still fighting, the war continued to rage in the Far East. One group greatly affected by this were the Allied families who had been living and working in China at the time it fell under Japanese occupation. A large number of these families were in Shanghai, and more than half of those taken prisoner were children. 3 of them told us their story.
It was estimated that there were 9 civilian internment camps in the Shanghai area. Many had previously been schools and public buildings.
I was 14 years old when I went into camp. Well, my vivid memory was one of hunger, fear, not knowing when we would ever get out of this camp.
Living conditions in the camps were tough.
We had to wash in water that was brought up from the creeks and boiled, tadpoles and all, and so it was very hard physically.
It was all very cramped. The whole family were in a room that was partitioned off, and the other side of the partition was another family. But we all had a little space in which to lie down, sort of head to toe.
The food was absolutely dreadful. It was rice sweepings, quite full of weevils and all kinds of insects that had been swept up off the floors.
There was a certain amount of meats which I found out only after the war that we were eating dog. I'd never had anything so horrible in my life.
We grew up at enormous speed. We saw things, of course, that were quite shocked, but we wouldn't have seen in a normal society.
Well, brutality went on every day. If a Japanese guard went past you, you had to stop and bow. If you didn't, you'd be slapped and hit.
We really lived day by day, and that was as far ahead as we were concerned. I mean, we didn't want to die, but...
By 1945, the children knew the war was coming to an end when American planes started appearing in the skies.
A plane came down between the buildings, and I happened to be on the roof of one of them at the time. And of course we were cheering and waving and at him. And the pilot gave us a thumbs up. Literally, you could see him at eye level going past.
But although excitement in the camps was growing, the Japanese had not yet been defeated.
The Japanese commandant threatened us, saying that the war in Europe was over And even if Japan surrendered, he had his orders that we were all to be killed.
Well, it's shocking to hear what those young children were forced to go through. And of course, as we all know, in August 1945, after the atomic bombs were dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, Japan finally surrendered. At this point, the Royal Navy's massive presence in the Far East, no longer needed for battle, could be redeployed to help rescue prisoners of war. One of these ships, HMS Belfast, was sent to Shanghai to find out what had happened to the Allied families that had been interned there. Well, I'm delighted now to be joined by three of the men who served on the ship at that time: John Whithouse, Bill Shaw and Victor Padbury. Good evening, gentlemen. Thank you for being with us. And what we're showing you now is footage from the Imperial War Museum that hasn't been seen before of your ship, the HMS Belfast, sailing into Shanghai at the end of September 1945.
The captain and the crew of Belfast spent the first few days visiting many of the former internees ashore. Many families were still living in the camps as they had nowhere else to go. The crew were shocked by the conditions they found, but impressed by the resolve the prisoners had shown while detained.
These kids hadn't had a childhood. They'd been pushed around from pillar to post and had a really horrible time.
The Belfast sailors, desperate to do something for the children, decided to throw a party on board the ship.
All they knew was the deprivation that they'd had, what they'd been through with their young lives. We wanted to give them something back.
So at the end of September 1945, for the first time in 3 years, the young Shanghai internees were able to celebrate.
The crew were just looked after us and made sure that we had a very happy time.
Long trestle tables loaded with food.
Jellies and ice cream and iced buns and sandwiches.
I was sick for weeks after, so I was terribly sick after we got back, because of course I hadn't had anything like that for years.
We had games and so on.
The sailors had rigged up swings on the guns, and we also were on mattresses sliding down very steep chutes, and we were caught by great hunky sailors at the bottom. It was bliss, absolute bliss.
It was absolutely out of this world.
It was really due to the kindness and warmth of the crew that we felt finally free after the 3-year internment. We felt this was the good time truly coming.
It was a wonderful party. I shall never forget it.
Had you realised how much it would mean to those children?
No, I don't think we did. It meant a lot to us, mind. It's very nice to know that they still remember it 60 years later.
What special memory do you have, Bill?
The children coming on board. After all that they'd been deprived of in their young lives, to suddenly be invited on board a ship like this, to a party, to have some fun. I believe in the first instance they were shocked. But once they got on board, all inhibitions went, and we, all of us, joined in the fun and thoroughly enjoyed ourselves. Every one of us, I'm sure.
Well, 11 of the children, now a few years older, are here to say a personal thank you for that day 60 years ago. You've always stayed in their memories and hearts, and we're about to reunite them with you. They're here in our audience. Please come down and join us. Now, chaps, if you come to this end of the sofa, and the ladies can sit that end. Well, one of the children we saw in the film is Esther Schifrin. She's flown in from Los Angeles to be here with us tonight, and on behalf of all the children who were at the HMS Belfast party, I know that, Esther, you'd like to say a few words, wouldn't you?
I would like to say on behalf of all of us here how absolutely wonderful it was of you to have us on the ship. I remember going up the gangplank and seeing all of you in white uniforms, looking so wonderful, and how the sailors got down on their knees so that they were the same height as us to greet us and welcome us on board. The loving feeling that they gave us, that we were loved and secure and that the war was really over. And it's just, I never thought this day could come that we could thank you. Thank you so very, very much.
Thank you.
In August this year, HMS Belfast is organising a reunion on board the ship for all those who were at the party in 1945. So if there are any other Belfast crew or former internees from Shanghai who are at that party, who are watching, details about the reunion are on our website and fact sheet, and the addresses for those will be coming up at the end of the show. Thank you to the members of the crew and the children of 45, ladies and gentlemen. Well, next tonight is a story about the 8,000 volunteers from Jamaica, Barbados, Trinidad and across the West Indies who joined the British Armed Services, and in particular about a man who volunteered to fly for the Royal Air Force. With me are sisters Betty and Molly. They contacted us to tell us about one of those young men who left Jamaica and found himself in North Yorkshire during the war. Betty and Molly, along with another sister, made this film for BBC America in an attempt to trace this young man.
We would like to get in touch with Lincoln Lynch, who we knew as Lynn, very much. Thank you.
Lincoln Lynch was an airman from Jamaica. Aged 20, he came to Britain to join the RAF. In 1942, he was posted to an airfield near York. There, he was introduced to the Convey family in nearby New Earswick.
He used to visit quite frequently. I should get a few hours off. And then we just sort of got to know him better and better as time went on.
Well, he did tell me once that he'd never known family life until he came to join us. And he was just like one of the family.
My other brother, Peter, he went in the Navy, so Lynn took over from where Peter left off, sort of thing.
The likes of Lynn from Jamaica, I mean, they didn't have to come, which I thought was marvellous.
And we didn't know any black men then, did we?
No. That was
really... very handsome, isn't he?
Yeah, very.
Oh, maybe still is.
Yeah.
Hope so, anyway.
Hope so, yeah. Well, I think he was always smiling, laughing. Everybody, whoever met him, they all used to wave at him and put thumbs up, you know.
And he was so lovable. I don't mean in a soppy way, but he was really very nice. He was somebody I could climb on his knee and comb his hair.
I mean, if my mother came into the room, he would stand up and open doors for her, which Yorkshire men don't do things like that.
It was hard for the family when they knew Lincoln had gone back to the airbase to fly dangerous missions over Germany. Mrs. Convey in particular was worried.
She always used to blacklead the fireside range like mad, and you know, to get it out of her system that she was upset that he'd gone back.
Well, after the war he went back to America and got married, and he and my mother kept in contact.
Oh, when my mother died, well, Margaret wrote to let them know, and then we just never got an answer, did we?
Lynn, we do really miss you. We often talk about you.
We still think about you a lot and wonder how you're getting on. I have 3 daughters, 1 son and 14 grandchildren, and they've all been involved in this, so I hope you can get in touch.
Well, firstly, I should say that Molly and Betty's sister Margaret, who is also in that film, was unfortunately unable to travel to the studio, but I know that she is just as keen to find out what happened to Lincoln, who you all call Lynn. He's obviously been very much on your mind for many, many years.
Yeah.
So where do you think, Betty, he might have been down all these years?
I don't know. I wondered if he'd retired to Jamaica, because he once said Jamaica was a lovely place, but you needed money, and he would go back when he had money. So whether he's got money and he's gone retired back there, I don't know.
Well, everyone can see how much Lincoln means to you, and guess what? We managed to trace him. He's alive and well and lives in New York, and what's more, you've all remained in his thoughts and heart for the last 60 years as well. And with the help of the BBC office in New York, he sent you this message.
Margaret, Betty, Molly, this is Lincoln, your long-lost friend, and hopefully your brother from New York. I was alone in a foreign country, but they made me feel very comfortable. It was like a home away from home. Betty, Molly, and Margaret, yes, they were like sisters. Although we're racially quite different, it could not have been easier.
But Lincoln still had a job to do for the RAF. He flew on dozens of difficult raids over enemy territory.
It was scary, especially when other people shooting at us, and intent on killing us. It was comforting to know that there were people, even in England, who would miss you if you didn't come back. I'm sorry that we lost contact, but that does not mean that I have forgotten the overall role you all played in my comfort and in my happiness while I was so far away from home.
Nice to see him on tape. Did you enjoy that?
Very much so, yes, it was lovely.
Thing is, it's a bit tricky to hug a tape, isn't it?
It is, yes.
It's a bit tricky,
yes,
yeah.
Yes.
But you can now hug the man himself. He's made the journey here all the way from America because you mean as much to him as he does to you. Here to catch up on all those missing years, please welcome Lincoln Lynch, accompanied by his daughter, Tamara. You're all right, my darling. You're okay. Take a seat. Take a seat. Well, Lincoln. He's still handsome, by the way, isn't he? Hasn't changed.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, it hasn't changed a bit. Your mum, of course, used to treat Lincoln absolutely like a member of the family, didn't she?
Oh, well, we all did. He was just another brother.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was marvellous.
And was in those days Yorkshire a bit of a culture shock for you, sir?
Yes. One of the things I remember, I'm from the West Indies, you see.
Yes.
And there in the West Indies, when we talk of pudding, pudding is supposed to be sweet.
I know where you're leading.
Well, the first time I had Yorkshire pudding, it was quite a shock. But I enjoyed it nevertheless.
What's it like seeing these ladies again for you?
I'm reminded of a song we used to sing in school. I'm not going to try and sing it. I don't want to bore your audience here, but part of it goes something like this. 40 years on, when afar and asunder, parted are those who are singing today. When we look back and forgetfully wonder what we were like at work and play, then it will be, they'll often come over you, glimpses of notes like the catch of a song, visions of boyhood will float them before you. How will it seem to you 40 years on? And I think of that now, and it brings tears to my eyes, because this family, I don't have words to describe how I feel and what their being there meant to me.
You seem to have done it very well to me. Betty, what's your final thought tonight about meeting Lincoln again?
I couldn't put it into words. I never really thought we would ever see him again, and it's absolutely marvellous. It really is.
Well, what are you going to do together now that you've met up again?
Definitely keep in touch. Definitely, yes.
Let's still find some of that Yorkshire pudding for you, don't worry about it. World War II produced so many heroes, and our next story comes from occupied Norway, where the RAF ran many dangerous raids against German forces there. Norway had been conquered and occupied by German troops for 5 years. It was of vital strategic importance to the Germans because it acted as a key supply route to German troops in Northern Europe. Severing this connection was an RAF priority. And the Air Force had a new weapon, the Mosquito. It was one of the fastest planes in the world because it was so light, built mainly out of balsa wood and veneer. Each Mosquito had only a 2-man crew, and one of these crews was navigator Ron Day and pilot Philip Davenport. In April 1945, in the closing weeks of the war, Ron and Philip, along with dozens of other Mosquito crews, left Scotland for a raid on the Norwegian port of Porsgrunn, full of German supply ships. But German fighters were waiting for them, and Ron and Philip's plane was hit. Well, the navigator of that Mosquito, Ron Day, amazingly survived and is here to tell us what happened. When did you realize that the plane had been hit?
Very shortly after we made the attack. There was a shout of fighters. I didn't actually see any. Glycol or coolant was streaming out of one engine, and I know my pilot, he could tell from the controls they weren't responding as they should do, and we were skimming along just over the top of the pine trees. Fortunately, very quickly, a lake appeared, and due to his presence of mind and skill, we made a successful ditching on this lake, which was largely covered by ice.
Did you think at one stage it was going to be all over for you?
Well, I'm sure we thought it was going to be very hairy, to say the least.
It seems as though he acted rather well under pressure.
No question whatever.
You got injured in the process, didn't you?
With the sudden deceleration on impact, I got belted on the back of the head, I think.
Oh, you were knocked out for a bit, were you?
Yeah, I got concussion.
Yeah. Well, the person who is best placed to take up the story from that point is your pilot. You haven't seen him since just after the war. Here to be with you all the way from Australia is Flight Lieutenant Philip Davenport.
I don't believe this. I don't believe it. I didn't know this was going to happen.
Come and sit down. So, can you put into words, gentlemen, what it's like to see each other after all these years?
It's quite unbelievable. I never expected to see this guy again. Not really.
So, what happened after the plane crashed and Ron was injured?
Well, I've been trying to listen to what Ron was saying so I don't say something different.
I hope I got
slid along the ice, and the thing bounced, and we went into the water and went down slowly. As the aeroplane sank fairly slowly, the water poured in and we were submerged, and I sensed something floating out. Anyhow, I found that I was trapped in the thing, and the movement was Ron floating up. Probably you didn't know what was happening, but the life jacket was taking you up.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
I began to lose hope at that stage of the piece, but then the Mosquito, doing the right thing, broke up and my leg came free, and I panicked and paddled up to the top. And this bloke was there with blood all over his face.
I mean, you were in freezing water. You were both injured. I mean, did you really feel that you weren't going to make it?
Yes.
Well, I think had it not been for the Norwegians who came to help us, we'd have probably gone with hypothermia or something.
Yeah. Well, I was going to lead on to that, because already this is an amazing tale of survival, but if it hadn't been for what happened next, it's hard to say if these two men would be with us today.
Several people saw the Mosquito go down. Among them were three men: Per Grini, aged 30 at the time, Johannes Hegland, aged 24, and Gunnar Holter, who was 19.
It disappeared behind that mountain, and it didn't come out again from where it went down. You could see that. Then we set off, running down there to the water. Then I shouted out a little bit in English. We are loyal Norwegians. We're going to help the two of you.
The rescuers knew how dangerous the cold conditions would be for the airmen.
Well, they would have been frozen to death. They'd have been stiff with cold.
Finally, they managed to get Ron and Philip ashore. Ron, the navigator, was in a bad way.
He'd been hit in the head, so he was bleeding a bit.
The rescuers decided to move the airmen to a nearby house. It was risky, but they wanted to try and keep them from the Germans, who they knew were coming.
We had thought of trying to hide them, if there was any chance of that. We had connections with the resistance forces up in the woods.
But Ron was getting worse. The rescuers finally accepted he needed hospital treatment, even if it meant both airmen ending up in German captivity.
It was a horrible feeling. It certainly was. They were just like our friends.
Despite the risks they ran, the rescuers are very modest about their brave actions.
Oh no, we don't think it was such a big deal. Certainly not heroes. What we did was just an ordinary human being's duty. No, I would rather describe the airmen as heroes.
Well, 60 years after saving Ron and Philip, they've flown all the way from Norway. Please welcome Johannes Hegland, Per Grini and Gunnar Holter. Come and sit down. Come and sit down, Ron. A second. You sit there. You sit there. We're, I don't know what language was going on there. About three, I think, but we're joined now by Tonalisa, who will do a bit of translation for us. Gunnar described these gentlemen as heroes, didn't he?
Yes, he did. Han lurer på, du har beskrevet disse herrene som helter.
Ja.
Hvorfor vil du beskrive de som helter, og ikke dere?
Nei, vi gjorde bare vår plikt å redde noen som var i nød. Så de var heltene, og vi gjorde vår menneskelige plikt.
He says that he feels that they are the heroes because they were just helping somebody who was in peril and needed their help. And of course they were the heroes as they would come and liberate the country.
Chaps, what final words do you have for these gentlemen who helped you out? You only had minutes to live at the time, if that.
We are a survival to these three gentlemen. I have very little doubt about that.
What would you like to say to them tonight?
I was just saying thank you.
And it's a great pleasure to see them again.
Thank you, one and all. Well, our final story tonight is about a member of the British Army captured and held by the Germans as a prisoner of war.
Harry Druitt was captured in the deserts of North Africa, but he ended up in a prisoner of war camp in Germany.
Stalag 4B was a very grim place. 25,000 prisoners of war. It really was the size of a small town. Life in the camp was really grim, tough. Many prisoners suffered from hunger, malnutrition, and the dreaded dysentery.
It's estimated that several thousand prisoners died or were killed in Stalag 4B. A mate of Harry's, Joe Brown, was shot as he reached through the barbed wire for one wild strawberry.
I heard a distinct crack. Joe had actually been shot. The sentry was still there with the rifle half-cocked. We were already inside the main compound. There was absolutely no need for it. I was shocked, shattered.
The men were desperate for any distraction from these horrors. Harry's answer was to help form a theatre group.
I went wholeheartedly into entertainment, and it was a great boon to me to forget hunger.
Apart from acting, there were props to make, tickets, posters and programs to design. Of course, the theatre group also needed some convincing female impersonators.
There was one in particular called Sugar. Everybody wolf whistled him. Then there was Bella. We weren't lacking in the female department, believe you me.
This is the BBC Home Service. Here is the news.
The theatre had an even more important role to play. A secretly built radio was hidden in the wall backstage.
Couldn't wait for the next bit of news. Every day we received a bulletin over the radio as to how our forces were progressing. We lived for it.
Another small victory and boost for prisoner morale was the singing at the end of each performance.
We sang Land of Hope and Glory, which turned out to be a very emotional hymn to us. My mates helped me to see a new way of life. Theatre, it made life worth living.
Well, we're joined by Harry Druitt, who saw in that film, and his son Tony. What about those female impersonators? They seemed to get it right, didn't they?
Yeah, they did, very much indeed.
Yes?
Yes, they went right to our hearts.
Really? You're going to have a reunion soon, aren't you?
Off to Germany, yes, for a reunion, but not until September of this year. The last reunion of Stalag 4B as well.
We'll have news, incidentally, about that reunion at the end of the show. Before we move on, though, there's something else. I know that one of your closest friends from Stalag 4B was Bruce Coombs, right?
Yes.
Well, Bruce, of course, sadly died recently. But we did manage to trace Bruce's family, and there is someone who would very much like to meet you. His name is Michael Coombs, and he's Bruce's son, and he's here. Squeeze in there somewhere.
Yes. Lovely. Bruce and I got on very well indeed.
Fantastic.
In fact, we got to the stage where I had a ring, a signet ring, and he had a soft silver ring. We just exchanged, but mine went the way of all things.
Well, it's
So
funny
there
you
it
should
is.
mention that, isn't it?
It is.
Because you've got something to tell him, haven't
Yes,
you?
yes.
Right.
When the BBC contacted me and told me the story, they mentioned the ring, and I immediately phoned my mother and asked her to check through my father's deed box, and she found various memorabilia from the war, including a ring. And I have it with me tonight.
Have you really?
I do.
Well done.
And I hope I can present you with your ring.
Ah, smashing. Thank you. Thank you.
still fits. Wonderful.
Yeah, look at that.
That's wonderful.
Lovely.
Did you know about your father's army record, or has that just come to light during our investigations?
He spoke very little about that period of his life, and so for me it's wonderful to have the opportunity to meet Harry and to find out more, which I hope I will do.
And he kept Harry's ring all down those years.
Yes.
Yeah, fantastic.
Absolutely.
Fantastic.
Lovely, eh?
Very nice
good.
indeed. Well done, Harry.
Well done.
Before we let Harry go, one thing that really struck me about his story was the fact that the Germans actually allowed the theatre group to sing Land of Hope and Glory at the end of every show. That was quite amazing.
Yes.
They allowed that.
Yes.
That's your fact.
They wouldn't let us sing national anthem, of course.
No, but it was close.
Our hearts and souls went into it.
Sure. Well, we're coming towards the end of our show, and Laurie Holloway and his band, along with Tara, would like to remind you of those times. And to Harry's surprise and delight, some former members of Stalag 4B's Empire Theatre Group are in the audience. Wilf Sutton and Harry Bannister, who Harry hasn't seen since the war. Doug Gillam, once known as Bella. Tom Swallow. Gerard Giltro and Lou Parsons. Nat Hoffman and Bill Ray. Alex Wood. And last but not least, Ray Newell and Mickey Reed. Ladies and gentlemen, the Empire Theatre Group. Why don't you come down and join us? With some of your old comrades.
Well done, George. Are you all right? Oh. Lovely. God bless you.
Well, we've had some amazing stories tonight, and for more information on the reunions we've mentioned and how you can tell your story on the BBC People's War website, details are on your screens now. Finally, our thanks to all who took part tonight, especially to Dame Vera Lynn. Thanks for coming, Vera. We'd like everyone now to join Laurie Holloway and the boys and Tara in our final song. Of course, it has to be We'll Meet Again, and so until we do, goodbye.
The memories come flooding back because of this programme, really have. Thank you very much.
That is the highest spot of my life now, meeting her. We owe our life to her.
It really brings tears to my eyes.
Fantastic. Nobody could have imagined that this day could occur, really.
He says he was really excited. It's a good feeling. They're very happy to be able to meet her.